Reborn once more, I tore up my engagement with Captain Ethan Collins and decided to marry a rough, simple logistics soldier instead. In my previous life, because I loved Ethan, I willingly gave up my own chance to enlist. But he took my spot and gave it to Grace Anderson, his first love. I stayed home, managing the household, while he spent his days passionately entangled with her. As time went on, Ethan grew increasingly disgusted with me, sending letter after letter demanding a divorce. When Ethan was later injured and discharged from service, I still stayed by his side, caring for him, helping him recover, and supporting him through every hardship. Yet when his career began to rise again, he still couldn't forget Grace, the white moonlight he had worshipped for years. Even the child I bore and raised with pain and effort eventually despised me, saying I wasn't worthy of his elegant, successful father, the respected businessman Ethan Collins, and forced me to leave with nothing but empty hands. This time, I've decided to step aside and let Ethan chase his so-called true love. As for me, I'll make plenty of money and push my husband, the rough, honest logistics soldier, into the military academy, so that one day he'll become a division commander, making everyone look at him with admiration. I decided to give up my enlistment opportunity and stay in the neighborhood textile factory as a worker. The neighborhood director looked at me in disbelief. "Emma Johnson, have you really thought this through? This is the last enlistment slot. Besides, that unit is exactly where your boyfriend is serving. Wouldn't it be wonderful for the two of you to strive together after you enlist?" My eyes fell on the bright red slogans painted outside the window. "A soldier brings glory to the whole family, and defend the motherland without regret. Dedicate your youth to the army." Silently, I confirmed once more that I had truly been reborn, back to the autumn of 1975, the season of military recruitment. I smiled faintly, my voice calm yet firm. "Director, women can hold up half the sky now. The textile industry is a vital pillar of the national economy. I'm still young, I can't let myself be consumed by love. I want to dedicate my strength to the cause of building socialism." In my previous life, my entire existence revolved around Ethan Collins, but in the end, I lost everything and died filled with regret. Reborn again, I swore I would never marry Ethan Collins. The neighborhood director, moved by my determined words, patted my shoulder enthusiastically. "Excellent. The torch of this new era has truly been passed to your generation. With your abilities, I'm sure you'll become a shining example for working women everywhere." I thanked her and left the office, walking down the familiar alleyway. I saw people in blue factory uniforms riding large frame bicycles. In that moment, the vivid, almost tangible feeling of rebirth washed over me. I couldn't help but lift my head toward the golden sunset and laugh softly. How wonderful. Everything is still in time. This life, I'll live for myself, a brilliant life in my own way. As soon as I stepped into the house, the rich aroma of stewed chicken instantly awakened all my senses, pulling me back to reality. According to the memories from my previous life, I slowly lifted my gaze toward the living room. Under the warm yellow light, I once again saw the man sitting on the sofa, Ethan Collins, 45 years younger, exactly as I remembered him. His youth carried a sharp, commanding aura. His thick brows, high nose bridge, and the cold restraint in his expression gave off a sense of distant dominance. Just one accidental glance from him made my heart tremble, my cheeks flush red. But I knew clearly, Ethan Collins had never truly loved me. He was the youngest regiment commander in the entire Southern Military District. He had a boundless future ahead of him, while I was nothing more than an ordinary textile worker, so ordinary it was almost laughable. If my grandfather hadn't once saved his grandfather's life during wartime, how could an engagement between us ever have existed in the first place? Ethan Collins frowned slightly when he saw me lost in thought. He handed me a piece of paper. It was the marriage application he had retrieved from the political office. He looked like he wanted to say something, but hesitated. His mother, Mrs. Collins, who had come with him, immediately cut in with a cold, firm voice. "This marriage should be put on hold for now," she said sharply. "Ethan is at a critical stage in his career. Young people shouldn't be burdened by emotional entanglements. At his age, he should be devoting himself to national defense. Protecting our country's security is what truly matters." My father's brows furrowed. His tone carried a hint of displeasure. "What you said isn't wrong, Mrs. Collins, but my daughter has also prepared to enlist. Wouldn't it be good for both of them to serve in the military together?" My father's eyes were full of kindness as he spoke up for me, but Mrs. Collins brushed him off coldly. "The army isn't a place for people to enjoy themselves," she snapped. "If she joins, it will only distract Ethan. Surely, you don't mean to make Emma Johnson a stumbling block in the path of Ethan's advancement, do you? Are you really trying to repay an old debt of gratitude by forcing my son to carry the burden of Emma's entire life?" Her eyes landed on me, filled with disdain, as though I were a worthless object. The Collins family came from generations of soldiers, deeply rooted and highly respected. Because of that, Ethan's parents had never thought highly of me. In the past, they had shown their discontent about this engagement more than once, but because of the old life-saving debt between our families, they couldn't openly break it off. So the matter had dragged on until now. The marriage application Ethan had just given me wasn't something he had wanted himself. It was his grandfather who had forced him to submit it. Meanwhile, my parents always went out of their way to remember Ethan's preferences and habits, putting his wishes above everything else. Every word, every gesture they made was cautious to the extreme, terrified of doing anything that might offend him. A marriage built on such inequality was meaningless. I stayed silent. Ethan narrowed his eyes at me, about to say something, but before he could open his mouth, I spoke first. "I think Mrs. Collins is absolutely right," I said calmly. "Marriage is a serious matter. It shouldn't be rushed." The room fell into stunned silence. No one had expected me to respond that way. Ethan looked utterly taken aback, his eyes filled with surprise and confusion. His lips parted slightly as if to speak, but in the end no words came out. A deep crease formed between his brows. Clearly, he hadn't yet adjusted to my reaction. In my previous life, Ethan had taken back the marriage application right in front of me. I had cried and begged him desperately, and in the end he reluctantly agreed, on one condition: that I would stay home to manage the household and serve his parents dutifully. If I could do that, he said, he would try to persuade them to approve of me. I agreed without hesitation, willingly giving up my opportunity to enlist. But then, he used that very enlistment slot to give to his youthful sweetheart, Grace Anderson. After we married, Ethan's regiment was transferred to the south, and he refused to let me go with him, leaving me behind alone in the north. I didn't complain. I poured all my heart into managing the family, waiting for him to return. But in Ethan's eyes, my diligence and devotion became something rustic and unsophisticated. My sincerity turned into vulgarity. His heart belonged entirely to Grace Anderson, the performer in the Army art troupe. He grew to despise me more and more, sending letters home insisting on divorce again and again. Later, during a field exercise, Ethan stepped on a landmine while trying to save Grace. His leg was badly injured, and his military career was over. Proud as he was, he refused to become a burden to the Army and wouldn't accept a desk job. In the end, he applied for discharge and returned home. Grace Anderson didn't hesitate for a second. She turned around and accepted the proposal of the commander's son. In an instant, Ethan Collins lost everything. He spiraled into despair, completely broken. And I, foolishly setting aside all the pain and humiliation of the past, stayed by his side. I refused to leave him. I taught myself acupuncture and spent countless days and nights caring for him, helping him recover. By the late 1980s, when the wave of economic reform swept across the country, Ethan seized the opportunity and stepped into the business world. He worked hard and eventually built a successful career. I thought that after all those years, maybe, just maybe, I could finally see a happy ending for us. That illusion shattered the day I was taking care of my sick mother-in-law in the hospital, and happened to see Ethan carefully supporting Grace Anderson into the maternity ward. In that moment, I finally realized what I had been too blind to see. The tenderness and affection in his eyes were things I had never once received. All this time, his heart had never let go of that youthful love. He didn't remember the years I'd spent tirelessly taking care of him, the sleepless nights I endured when he was injured, or the sacrifices I made for him. To him, everything I did was nothing more than a burden. His heart was like a block of ice. No matter how much warmth I poured into it, it never melted. As the years passed, his coldness chipped away at me. I became a pitiful woman, someone the world mocked behind my back. Even my own child, the one I had carried for 10 months and raised with every ounce of love I had, began to look down on me. "Mom," my son said with disgust, "you should look in the mirror. What part of you deserves Dad? Aunt Grace and Dad are the ones who truly belong together. You're the reason they couldn't be together all these years, because you were trying to repay some so-called family debt. You should have let Dad go a long time ago." Even at his wedding, I, the mother who had given birth to and raised him, wasn't invited. Instead, it was Grace Anderson, the woman who had destroyed my marriage, who sat in the seat of honor beside Ethan, basking in the blessings of their guests. The final, most devastating blow came from the very child I had spent my entire life protecting. I had sacrificed everything for him, my youth, my pride, my happiness, and in the end, it was his own hands that tore my heart to pieces. I hated myself. I couldn't accept it. Because of Ethan Collins, I had wasted an entire lifetime. In this new life, I will stay far away from Ethan Collins. I will live for myself. Ethan ignored propriety and pulled me into a room, closing the door behind us. He lowered his voice and tried to explain patiently. "Emma, my parents just think we're still young. There's no need to rush into marriage right now. The military district has been busy lately, but once things calm down, I'll resubmit our marriage application. Besides, if we're in the same unit after getting married, it might cause unnecessary problems. As for your enlistment, maybe you should think it over a bit more." I looked at him and smiled faintly, my tone calm. "No need to think it over. Ethan Collins, I never intended to enlist just to become your comrade in arms." My words caught him off guard. For a moment, he just stared at me, clearly unable to believe I would give up such a rare opportunity so easily. A faint, mocking smile tugged at his lips as he replied, his voice tinged with irony. "Emma Johnson, since when did you learn this little trick, acting distant just to hold on tighter? Enlistment isn't a game. The army isn't a place for you to play around with your emotions." His words might have sounded righteous, but I knew better than anyone that they were hollow. In my previous life, he had used our engagement as an excuse to force me to give up my enlistment spot, only to hand it over to Grace Anderson. And now, in this life, he was already beginning to repeat the same excuses, one after another. To stop me from joining the army, let's be honest, Ethan Collins simply wanted me to give up my enlistment spot for his white moonlight, Grace Anderson. I clenched my fists tightly. I had already made up my mind. I was about to tell Ethan that I wanted to break off our engagement when a loud knock suddenly came from the door, followed by Mrs. Collins's sharp voice from outside. "Ethan, it's getting late. We should go. Didn't you say you'd help Grace fix her radio today?" Ignoring our unfinished conversation, Ethan only turned back to say briefly, "I'll come find you once I'm done," before leaving in a rush without even glancing back. I watched his figure fade into the distance, already knowing I wouldn't see him again that night. My parents, eager to welcome him properly, had even slaughtered the chicken they'd been saving for the new year. My father had woken up early that morning, sweeping the front yard several times and carefully scrubbing each stone on the front steps with clean water. My mother had been busy all day, wiping the square wooden table over and over again, then gently spreading the floral tablecloth she treasured so much she rarely used it. The window panes sparkled after being polished with old newspapers, and even the portrait of the national leader hanging on the wall had been dusted carefully. But despite all their efforts, Ethan Collins still couldn't be persuaded to stay for dinner. As long as Grace Anderson was around, he would forget I even existed. Grace had been Ethan's classmate in high school. Beautiful, talented, graceful in both singing and dancing. She was the light in his heart, the one he had never stopped adoring. Because of her family background, she had once missed her chance to enlist, and now that her family issues were finally resolved, she was eligible again. But the last enlistment spot in our district had already been assigned to me. For Grace, Ethan would go through fire and water, climb mountains, cross rivers. So what was forcing his fiancée to give up a single opportunity compared to that? In my previous life, to secure that very enlistment spot for Grace Anderson, Ethan had even agreed to marry me. And from that moment on, my life was trapped in tragedy. I wasted my youth, trading years of devotion for nothing but heartache. But this time, I would still give up that spot to Grace Anderson. Not out of love, but because I wanted to sever every tie between Ethan and me once and for all. I wanted to see whether, once I stepped aside, the two of them could truly stay together for the rest of their lives. The words I'd meant to say never left my mouth, but it didn't matter. In just 5 days, Ethan's leave would end, and Grace would officially join the Army art troupe. Their unit would soon be transferred to the south, and from then on, with the vast sky and distant land between us, Ethan and I would no longer have any connection whatsoever. After dinner, I couldn't bear to stay home watching my parents' worried faces, so I went for a walk along the riverbank to calm the whirlwind of emotions inside me after experiencing this rebirth. Before I realized it, my feet had carried me near the military barracks where Ethan was stationed. From afar, the faint glow of the barracks lights shimmered through the night, stirring memories I had tried to bury. The base wasn't far from home, yet Ethan rarely came back. Was it really because he was too devoted to his country, too busy to visit, or had he simply been avoiding me all along? Ever since he enlisted, Ethan had seldom taken the initiative to come home. Each time he was granted a short leave, I would begin preparing long before his return. I would pick out my neatest outfit, carefully braid my glossy black hair into 2 tidy plaits, and pack roasted sunflower seeds I'd made myself, along with handmade pastries I hoped he'd like. Every time I saw his familiar silhouette after countless sleepless nights missing him, my heart would race with excitement and anticipation. But back then, I had deliberately ignored the fleeting look of disdain that passed through Ethan Collins's eyes every time he saw me. Thinking back on it now, I only feel empty and bitter. Just then, my eyes accidentally caught sight of a couple walking not far from the barracks. Ethan Collins was strolling slowly beside a young woman. She had a graceful figure, dressed in a floral dress that fit her curves perfectly. Her long, silky black hair flowed naturally down her back, glimmering so beautifully that even the streetlights seemed to reflect a soft glow off it. Their hands were clasped tightly together, their eyes full of intimacy and tenderness. It was Grace Anderson, the very woman who had inserted herself into my marriage in my previous life, entangling me in misery for half of it. My chance had come. I steadied my emotions, quickened my pace, and stopped in front of Ethan Collins and Grace Anderson. My voice was cold, edged with a mocking smile. Ethan Collins. So this is where you fix radios now? At the riverbank? Ethan's face turned pale, as if struck by lightning. He quickly pulled his hand away from Grace's. His brows furrowed as he looked at me, panic flickering in his eyes. Emma, didn't I tell you to wait for me at home? What are you doing here? Were you following me? I let out a short, sarcastic laugh. What? Is this road your private property? If I hadn't decided to take a walk, I wouldn't have discovered why you suddenly withdrew our marriage application. Ethan's expression stiffened, his eyes darting away. Emma, you misunderstood. The decision to postpone the marriage is between us. It has nothing to do with Grace. At that moment, Grace gently tugged on Ethan's sleeve, pretending to be fragile and innocent. Her voice was soft enough to melt butter. Ethan, don't argue with Miss Johnson because of me. I don't want to see you upset. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly, my tone sharp with contempt. Oh, what an impressive performance. You mean to tell me you didn't know he's engaged, and yet you're here acting pitiful? Don't you have any shame? Grace's eyes immediately turned red as she looked pitifully at Ethan. Ethan, did she misunderstand me? I've only ever seen you as a good friend. Of course, just like in my previous life. She always acted this way, pretending to keep her distance while deliberately holding on, appearing at just the right moments to drive a wedge between us, and every single time, Ethan would side with her. This time was no exception. Ethan immediately pulled Grace behind him, shielding her as he frowned at me. His voice was stern and disapproving. Emma Johnson, watch your tone. There's nothing improper between Grace and me. Our relationship is completely innocent. I widened my eyes and raised my voice, dripping with irony. Innocent? Holding hands counts as innocent now? Ethan, do you think I'm a 3-year-old who can't tell what's going on? I'm your fiancé. Is this how you repay the years I've been with you? All my life, I had endured and stayed silent before him. But this was the first time I fought back, and it left him speechless. Around us, several nosy middle-aged women had already perked up their ears, eager to listen. They exchanged knowing looks and began whispering to one another. I couldn't hear their words clearly, but judging by their excited expressions and pointing fingers, I knew that within 2 days, our scandal would spread through the entire neighborhood. Grace seemed worried too. After all, no woman wanted to be labeled a homewrecker who destroyed a soldier's engagement. She tugged lightly on Ethan's sleeve, her voice soft and apologetic. Ethan and I are just old classmates. We've always been close, so maybe I rely on him a bit too much sometimes. Her eyes shimmered with tears as she added pitifully, "It's my fault for making you misunderstand the relationship between Ethan and me." I let out a cold laugh. Misunderstand? Anyone looking at how close you two are would see exactly what's going on. If the two of you were together openly and honestly, I might still respect your so-called love. But what is this? You both want to play the virtuous ones while sneaking around in the dark? The moment those words left my lips, Grace Anderson's eyes filled with tears. She choked out between sobs, "Emma Johnson, Ethan and I have never done anything wrong to you. How could you say such things about me?" In front of Ethan Collins, she always acted like a fragile, innocent flower, pure and delicate. But behind his back, she constantly provoked me. Her cruel words from my previous life were still carved deep into my memory. "You have nothing," she had said. "Just a poor, pitiful girl from the countryside. What makes you think you're good enough to marry Ethan Collins? You even went to his unit begging to follow him into the army. How shameless can you be? Didn't your family force him to marry you because of that old life-saving debt? People like you, lowly and poor, even if you died, no one would care." In my past life, I had been too weak to fight back, but this time, I refused to let her trample me again. I wouldn't lose to her. Not in this life. Sure enough, Ethan's face darkened, his voice rising in anger. "Emma Johnson, watch what you say. I withdrew the marriage application because of work. I needed to reconsider the timing. Don't drag Grace into this. There's nothing filthy between us. You're being unreasonable. I want you to apologize to Grace right now." Beside him, Grace wiped away her tears, but in the depths of her eyes, I caught a flash of satisfaction. In my previous life, every time we argued, Ethan always sided with her, forcing me to apologize. I had cried, insisting that she was the one who provoked me first, but he never believed me. To him, Grace Anderson, the gentle, refined, cultured woman, couldn't possibly speak such venomous words. And now, she continued her act, her voice trembling softly as she clutched Ethan's arm. "Ethan, it's my fault. Please don't be mad at Miss Johnson because of me." Her tone was kind and forgiving on the surface, but every word was fuel to the fire. I walked straight past Ethan, pointing a finger right in Grace's face. My voice was cold and sharp. "Shut your mouth. Stop pretending to be some pitiful little angel. You're disgusting. Destroying other people's relationships while playing the victim." In my previous life, I had never dared to talk back to Ethan. I had never been this strong. He was furious, practically shouting, "Emma Johnson, if you won't apologize, then get out of my sight. I'll never marry a rude, vicious woman like you." I laughed, a bitter, mocking laugh that cut through the night air. "Ethan Collins, don't worry. From now on, you'll never have to see me again." Ethan froze, his eyes flashing with alarm. "What do you mean?" "Exactly what you've always wanted," I said calmly. "Our engagement was arranged when we were children. We never registered for marriage, so as of now, consider it broken. I won't keep deceiving myself. You don't owe me anything, and you don't need to marry me out of gratitude to your grandfather. Stay with Grace Anderson. I'm stepping aside. I wish you both happiness. From this moment on, our engagement is over. Whatever happens next, we go our separate ways." I turned and walked away without looking back. In my past life, I had watched Ethan Collins's back as he walked away from me countless times. But in this life, it was finally my turn to be the one to leave first. 2 nights later, in the middle of the night, half asleep and half awake, I heard a faint tapping at my window. I already knew who it was. After all, this wasn't the first time. Not wanting to wake the neighbors and give them more to gossip about, I quietly pushed open the window. And there he was, Ethan Collins, climbing through the window ledge, stepping silently into my room. His eyes were deep and still, like a silent lake, dark, unwavering, and locked tightly onto me. In them I could almost see 1,000 unsaid words, emotions surging beneath the calm surface like hidden waves. That look again. It was that very gaze, so full of what seemed like passion and lingering tenderness, that had deceived me in my previous life, again and again, until I was completely lost in him. I secretly dug my nails into my thigh, reminding myself to stay calm. My voice was cold when I asked, "What are you doing here, Ethan Collins?" He grabbed my wrist firmly, his voice low and demanding as he leaned closer. "I heard from the neighborhood director that you gave up your enlistment spot. Is that true?" I nodded. "Yes. I don't have the ambition for that path, so I decided not to enlist, to avoid causing unnecessary trouble for the organization." I thought Ethan would be pleased. After all, he had always been waiting for me to give up my enlistment spot so that he could hand it over to Grace Anderson. But instead, his expression instantly darkened. "Emma Johnson, what are you playing at?" he snapped. "First, you give up enlistment, then you break off our engagement. Don't you think you've taken this joke far enough?" I curled my lips into a faint, mocking smile. "Isn't this exactly what you've wanted all along? You get to give the enlistment slot to Grace Anderson, and I even step aside so she can take my place as your wife. The two of you can soar through the military ranks together, the golden couple of the regiment." Ethan's face froze in shock, clearly not expecting me to say it outright. He rubbed the tip of his nose awkwardly, at a loss for words. "What nonsense are you talking about? I already promised my grandfather, once this busy period in the military is over, I'll marry you. Before I'm transferred to the South, I'll even make sure you're pregnant. The position of Mrs. Collins has always been yours. You don't need to pull stunts like this just to get my attention. People outside are already gossiping, and Grace has been very upset these past few days. I don't want these rumors to hurt her." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. I lowered my head, trying to hide the moisture gathering in my eyes. Even though my heart had long gone cold, there were still corners of it that ached. So that was why he came. Not because he still cared about me, but because he didn't want Grace Anderson to suffer from gossip. "Ethan Collins," I asked softly, "you never loved me, did you? So why insist on marrying me?" He froze, confusion flickering across his face before his brows knit together impatiently. "What difference does it make, love or not? This marriage was arranged by our parents long ago, decided by a matchmaker. It's not something I ever had a choice in." I was silent for a moment before speaking again, my voice calm and steady. "Ethan, chasing after you all this time has been exhausting. I don't want to do it anymore. For years, I convinced myself that we'd always be together. But looking back now, that was just a lie I told myself." He said nothing, only pressed his lips tightly together, his expression unreadable. I took a deep breath. "You should go. Don't come looking for me again. Let's each live our own lives in peace." The air froze between us. Then I heard him let out a low, scornful laugh. "Fine. Then let's end it here. I just hope you don't regret what you've said tonight." Without another word, he climbed back out the window the same way he came. With a sharp thud, the window slammed shut behind him. This time, his departure didn't shake me. I turned off the desk lamp, closed my eyes, and drifted back to sleep. Without that engagement, Ethan Collins and I were always meant to be two parallel lines. Never meant to cross. I was no longer naive enough to believe he couldn't bear to leave me. Even if there had once been a flicker of affection in his heart, it was nothing more than a fleeting, meaningless impulse. In my previous life, I had never once set foot in his heart. And in this life, I certainly wouldn't either. As long as I cut away all lingering attachments, Ethan Collins and I would have nothing more to do with each other. From now on, I would use the advantage of my rebirth to focus entirely on earning money. The era of economic reform was just around the corner. This time, I wouldn't be foolish enough to fall in love again. I would fight for myself. After Ethan's home leave ended, he returned to his unit, while I began my new routine, arriving at the textile factory before dawn each day. Surrounded by rows of massive weaving machines, I concentrated on every movement, every small detail of their operation, never daring to let my mind drift for even a second. During my short breaks, I eagerly sought advice from the most experienced workers, learning every bit of technique I could. Neighbors and co-workers gossiped behind my back. "Has that Johnson girl lost her mind?" someone whispered. "She gave up being an officer's wife just to become a factory worker? Her father must be furious. No matter how skilled a worker she becomes, she's still just labor class. How could that compare to being the wife of a regimental commander?" Of course, none of them had memories of a past life as I did. Their vision was limited. They couldn't know that after 1984, the government would begin scaling back planned production quotas, and by the mid-1980s, China would become the world's largest textile powerhouse. The private economy would explode with opportunity. Right now, clothing consumption was still modest. Materials, colors, and styles were all simple and repetitive. But in the future, the textile and fashion industries wouldn't just meet basic needs. They would evolve toward personalization, style, and function, diversifying rapidly. I had to stay in the factory for a few years, master the craft, and prepare myself. When the country entered its era of rapid development and reform, I would be ready to rise with it. With the foresight of my second chance, I was certain I could start my own business and make my dreams come true. That morning, I left home early for work, walking along the riverbank that bordered the city. Suddenly, a loud snorting sound shattered the morning calm. I turned just in time to see a massive black pig leap off a military supply truck. Before I could react, the beast charged straight at me at full speed. Terrified, I turned and ran, but it was relentless, barreling after me like a storm. Behind it, a young military serviceman had jumped off the truck, shouting as he chased the runaway pig. The scene was pure chaos. Me running, the pig chasing, and the soldier chasing the pig. The wild pursuit stretched along the riverbank until my foot slipped. With a splash, I plunged straight into the icy water. The shock stole my breath. The freezing current soaked through my clothes, biting deep into my skin. I struggled desperately, thrashing in panic as the river swallowed me whole. Was I really going to die again, reborn just to drown because of a pig? Dirty river water filled my eyes, nose, and mouth. I coughed and gasped, my lungs burning. Tears welled up, though they were lost in the swirling current. Was fate mocking me all over again? I flailed, reaching for anything to grab onto, but my hands only closed around slick, useless water grass. Just then, the soldier who had been chasing the pig spotted me fall in. Without a second thought, he dove into the river. With a few strong strokes, he reached me, wrapping his firm arm around my waist and pulling me toward the shore. By the time we got to land, I was drenched and miserable. My soaked clothes clung tightly to my body, outlining every curve of my chest. The soldier quickly stripped off his own wet uniform jacket, wrung it out, and handed it to me, signaling for me to put it on. He scratched his head awkwardly, his eyes flickering with a mix of embarrassment and concern. "Comrade, I'm so sorry," he said sheepishly. "That pig didn't know any better. It must have scared you half to death." But I didn't answer right away, because at that moment, I got a clear look at his face. My whole body froze. A complicated rush of emotion welled up inside me. 45 years ago, in my previous life, I had met him once before. It was right after I had married Ethan Collins. Ethan had grown so tired of me that he eventually sent a letter demanding a divorce. Lost and desperate, I packed a few pieces of clothing and boarded 3 different buses. After 3 days and 2 nights, over 2,000 kilometers, I finally reached his military base in the south. But Ethan refused to see me. Instead, he sent someone to hand me a slip of paper that read, "Life has become too suffocating. We don't share the same ideals. Continuing like this won't do either of us any good. Let's divorce and find our own peace." Unable to see him, I wandered outside the camp, hungry, cold, and utterly drained. I eventually collapsed near the fence. That was when a young, honest-looking logistics soldier happened to pass by. He gave me 2 steamed buns and even helped me find a small inn that didn't require a letter of introduction so I'd have somewhere to rest. Years later, I learned that he was a cook and quartermaster in Ethan's unit. His name was Aaron Blake. He was intelligent and hardworking, but because his family had been poor, he'd only finished middle school before enlisting. And now, in this new life, our paths had crossed again. Twice. Wasn't that some kind of destiny? I couldn't help but think that perhaps fate had brought Aaron Blake back into my life for a reason. A strange, warm fondness began to stir inside me. I bit my cold, trembling lip, pretending to pout in mock frustration. What kind of pig wrangling is that? Letting it run wild and nearly kill me. You can't just let this go. Aaron rubbed the back of his neck, looking guilty and flustered. It's my fault. I'll definitely make sure this pig learns some discipline. I'm really sorry you had to go through that. I narrowed my eyes and, with deliberate mischief, said, "And what about the fact that you saw my body? How are you planning to make up for that?" His face went crimson as he dropped his gaze to the ground, gripping the hem of his uniform. His voice came out in a stammering whisper. I didn't mean to. Whatever you say, I'll do it." Trying to hold back a grin, I put on a serious expression and sighed. A girl's reputation is everything, you know. If people find out about this, all those gossiping aunties will say I've lost my virtue. How could I ever show my face again? As I said that, I bit my lip to suppress the smile threatening to curl at the corners of my mouth. Aaron really was as honest as I remembered. He blushed so hard he couldn't even look at me. "Please don't listen to gossip," he stammered, completely flustered. I'll take responsibility for you. After being reborn, I had sworn to focus entirely on my career, leaving love behind. But fate has a way of finding you when you least expect it. And in his gaze, so genuine and steady, something tender began to grow quietly between us. After just a few short meetings during his brief military leaves, I made up my mind. I would spend my life with Aaron Blake. In those years when goods were still scarce, every time we met, he would save up his meal coupons to bring me a tin lunchbox packed full of food. Simple, yet hearty, and always with a few special dishes tucked inside. Whenever there was meat, he'd push it all into my bowl without hesitation, keeping only the vegetables for himself. "Emma," he'd say gently, "eat more. You're too thin." The way he looked at me, full of care and quiet affection, was something I had never seen in Ethan Collins's eyes. Aaron came from a humble background. His parents worked tirelessly year after year, just barely making enough to survive. But through sheer determination and hard work, he never once gave up. Aaron Blake had always excelled, passing every assessment and selection within the Army with flying colors. That day, when we met again, we took a slow walk down a narrow dirt path. He looked as if he had something to say but hesitated for a while before finally speaking. "Emma," he said quietly, "our division is being transferred to the south. Once we leave, it'll be hard for me to see you again, so—" He paused, taking a deep breath, his eyes sincere and steady. "Why don't we get married? Come with me to the south, that way we'll never have to be apart again." I froze for a moment, thinking he was about to say goodbye. But when I realized what he had truly said, relief and joy flooded my chest. I had finally reached my goal. Smiling, I nodded vigorously. Aaron's face lit up with excitement. That very same day, he returned to his unit and submitted a marriage application. Of course, rumors about us spread quickly throughout the military compound. When I told my parents that I wanted to marry Aaron Blake, a logistics soldier, a cook who slaughtered pigs for the mess hall, it was as if I had dropped a boulder into a calm lake, sending shockwaves through our family and the entire neighborhood. "Are you out of your mind?" my mother shouted, eyes wide with disbelief and anger. "You gave up marrying a regimental commander just to marry a butcher?" I stayed calm. "Mom, Aaron's a soldier too. A commander might be impressive, but Ethan Collins never cared about me. He never respected you or Dad, either. Aaron might only be a logistics soldier, but I believe in his ability and determination. He has a bright future ahead of him. And most importantly, he treats me with genuine kindness. I feel safe with him." My mother's face turned red with rage. She stomped her foot, shouting, "Safe? What do you know about safety? That man spends his days chopping meat and gutting pigs. He's nothing but a butcher. How could he ever compare to Ethan Collins? You're throwing your life away." My father paced the floor angrily, tapping his pipe against the ground with heavy, deliberate thuds. Before long, news of my sudden decision to marry a cook spread throughout the entire street. Every corner of the neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Mrs. Wong, sitting on a small stool outside her house, picked vegetables while chatting animatedly with the neighbor beside her. "Has that Johnson girl lost her mind? Every woman dreams of marrying a commander, and she just threw it all away. And now she wants to marry a pig butcher? Mrs. Zhang, sitting nearby, shook her head disapprovingly. Exactly, what's gotten into her? If she ends up miserable later, she'll only have herself to blame. Then my aunt-in-law, Mrs. Wang, who had never liked our family, chimed in with a smug expression. You ladies don't know the half of it. That Emma girl isn't as proper as she looks. I heard someone already saw her body. Why else would she be rushing to get married? You think a commander would still want her now? The moment those words left her mouth, my mother's face turned purple with fury, while my father slammed his hand down on the table. The two of them stormed out and got into a shouting match with her right there on the street. If you dare to spread one more lie, my mother yelled, I'll tear that gossiping mouth of yours right off your face. But their anger couldn't change my mind. To stop me, my parents locked me in my room and forbade me from going out. My mother sat right outside the door, her voice full of desperation. Emma, listen to your mother. Break things off with that butcher boy. We'll go talk to the Collins family. It's not too late to fix things. Meanwhile, Ethan Collins, still serving in the army, soon heard that I had not only broken off our engagement, but also planned to marry Aaron Blake, a logistics soldier. He must have been livid and humiliated. So he took a special leave from his unit, bringing along one of his aides, just to come to my house and see how pathetic I'd become. When he saw me, a mocking smile curled on his lips and his voice dripped with disdain. I heard you're marrying Aaron Blake, he said with a cold chuckle. Well, that's certainly something new. I thought you canceled our engagement because you had your eyes on someone higher up the ladder, maybe a general. Turns out I was wrong. He sneered, his tone sharper now. So tell me, Emma, how exactly am I, a regimental commander, not good enough compared to a mere kitchen soldier? All he knows is how to kill pigs and cook, Ethan Collins sneered, his tone dripping with contempt. Is it the smell of grease on his clothes that's made you lose your mind? Then he deliberately raised his voice, clearly wanting the entire neighborhood to hear him. His eyes gleamed with arrogant disdain as he continued. You really have an unusual taste, Emma. You could have been the wife of a regimental commander, but instead you're choosing to spend your life with a kitchen hand, living in a world of smoke and fat. Despite the venom in his words, I stayed perfectly calm. I lifted my chin slightly, meeting his gaze head-on. My voice was steady, every word sharp and deliberate. Commander Collins, I said coolly, you've lived your life looking down from above for so long that you've started believing power and rank can buy you everything. But I'm not the kind of woman who worships status. What Aaron Blake gives me is something you'll never understand, and you don't deserve to judge it. Ethan's expression froze. His jaw tightened, and his face flushed with anger. His teeth ground audibly as he spat. Fine. Let's see if you still laugh when you're crying with regret later. He threw out those bitter words and stormed away, his boots striking the ground hard as he left. But I knew him too well. I had spent a lifetime beside him once before. His anger today wasn't born from love, it was from wounded pride. Not long after Ethan left, Aaron Blake arrived. He wore a crisp military uniform, holding a carefully wrapped box of pastries from the market and a slab of fresh pork. Standing outside my home, he looked nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, before knocking firmly on the door. When my parents opened it, their faces were cold, their expressions unreadable. Aaron's throat tightened, but he straightened his back and spoke with quiet determination. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson, he began respectfully, I know you still have concerns about me and Emma. It was wrong of me not to visit earlier. That's my fault. But I'm here now because I truly want to marry her. I may not hold a high position, but my salary is enough to support both of us. Every cent I earn, I'll give to Emma to manage. I know I can't compare to Commander Collins in rank or status, but I have a sincere heart. I can promise her a life that's stable and warm. Please, give me a chance. There was no arrogance in his tone, no attempt to impress. Only honesty and resolve. My parents didn't respond immediately, but I saw the change in their eyes. The icy resistance that had filled the room slowly began to melt away. My mother turned aside with a sharp huff, refusing to look at him, but she didn't continue to argue. My father tapped his pipe against the floor a few times, then let out a long sigh. I knew then. They had silently given their blessing. Before long, our marriage request was approved by the army. There was no grand wedding, no white dress, no fancy banquet. We held a simple ceremony in a small hall at Aaron's unit. His comrades decorated the walls with red paper cutouts shaped like the Chinese character for double happiness, filling the air with warmth and sincerity. Aaron stood tall in his neatly pressed uniform while I wore a modest red dress. Side by side, we faced our friends and comrades, our eyes meeting with quiet certainty and hope for the future. And just like that, we stepped into marriage. Two people bound not by luxury or status, but by faith in each other and in the world we were building. In the tide of a changing era, we leaned on one another, holding fast to our love and our ideals. Soon after the wedding, Aaron's unit was transferred to the south, and I followed him to Shen City. But unlike most army wives, I didn't intend to spend my days only tending to the kitchen or raising children. I had dreams of my own. In my previous life, I had visited Shen City several times. Back then, it had already become one of the most developed metropolises in the country, famous even across the world. But now, more than 45 years earlier, it was only beginning its transformation. Back then, Shen City was still just a small fishing village. Aaron Blake worried that I would have a hard life there, but I wasn't concerned in the least. I knew that once the 1980s arrived, this place would become the engine of the nation's economy, a symbol of explosive growth and opportunity. Shen City was the future, and I intended to seize it. I had already drawn up a rough plan for myself before coming here. Naturally, it still revolved around textiles, the field I knew best and had the most experience in. Within the military housing complex, I soon became known among the other wives, not for being gentle or submissive, but for my confidence and decisiveness. I often spoke with Aaron about the future. Just as I had predicted, he wasn't content to spend his whole life in a kitchen surrounded by pots and smoke. One evening, I looked at him seriously and asked, "Aaron, are you really planning to spend your whole life cooking in the army canteen? You have the ability. You should be at a military academy, out in the field, leading men." He hesitated, a little embarrassed. "Emma, working in the kitchen isn't bad. Besides, getting into a military academy isn't easy." I met his gaze, my tone firm but full of encouragement. "Of course it isn't easy, but if you never try, how will you ever know you can't? Everyone with ambition is working hard to rise higher. Do you really want to spend your life breathing in smoke and grease?" With my constant encouragement and gentle pressure, Aaron finally picked up his books again. Night after night, after his shifts, he studied tirelessly. After months of effort, he passed the entrance exams and was accepted into the National Military Academy. While Aaron was away studying, I gave birth to our first daughter. From that moment on, every burden of the household fell squarely on my shoulders. But unlike my past life, I didn't feel weary or bitter this time. Because when love is built on respect, it becomes a source of strength, not weakness. The 1980s were a time of both boundless opportunity and tremendous challenge. I refused to let myself grow idle or fall behind. In our tiny one-bedroom apartment, I rocked my baby to sleep while sketching business ideas late into the night. My only asset was an old sewing machine I'd spent weeks searching for at the second-hand market. But that machine was my lifeline, my weapon to carve out a new destiny. By day, I carried my daughter on my back, roaming the streets to find cheap fabric. By night, I worked tirelessly, hunched over the sewing table, cutting, measuring, and stitching. Every thread, every stitch was a step toward the future I was building. I pored over fashion magazines imported through the port, studying new styles and silhouettes. I experimented with ways to weave those modern elements into my own designs. Whenever I ran into technical problems, I didn't hesitate to seek out veteran tailors, humbly learning everything I could, one detail at a time. At first, my clothes only sold within the military housing area or on small street stalls nearby. My lack of experience and a limited market meant sales were slow, but I didn't let it discourage me. I kept improving, refining my craftsmanship, upgrading the quality of my fabrics, and tweaking my designs to match what people actually wanted. Gradually, customers began to love my work. They praised its originality and high quality. As orders increased, I decided to rent a small workshop and hire a few workers. Bit by bit, I expanded production. My business began to flourish, and for the first time, my career truly took off. At the same time, Aaron Blake graduated with distinction from the military academy. Like a rocket ignited, he rose swiftly through the ranks. Armed with solid knowledge and relentless determination, he proved himself time and again in the field. From his earliest assignments, he volunteered for the most demanding missions. Calm under pressure, decisive in every command. Under his leadership, his unit became known for its strict discipline, outstanding training, and a series of impressive achievements during military exercises and real operations alike. Thanks to his steady success in real operations, Aaron Blake's rank continued to rise until he officially joined the senior command ranks. Several years later, during a military event, I unexpectedly ran into Grace Anderson again, the same woman who once wielded charm and power like a weapon, but was now forgotten by nearly everyone. She glanced at me briefly, then quickly turned away, avoiding my eyes, as if even looking at me might remind her of everything she'd lost. A few of the other military wives nearby whispered to me about what had happened to her over the years. It turned out that Ethan Collins had been injured during a mission several years earlier, sustaining a severe leg wound. He received a disability pension and was later discharged from service, taking a minor government job back home, but Grace had looked down on him, saying he was no longer worthy of her. She divorced him without hesitation. Soon after, she latched onto a senior officer, a married man, who divorced his wife to be with her. For a while, she flaunted her new status, acting arrogant and condescending toward everyone in the Army's performing arts troupe, as if she were untouchable. But her pride and vanity eventually backfired. She offended too many people, and little by little, she was isolated. Then, for reasons no one fully understood, that engagement fell apart. The middle-aged officer quickly married another woman, leaving Grace completely abandoned and disgraced. Without love or protection, she lost both her influence and her standing. In the troop, she became irrelevant, an afterthought. As for Ethan Collins, after leaving the Army, his administrative work didn't last long. He made a serious mistake that caused major financial losses to the government. He was dismissed from his post soon after. Since childhood, Ethan had been the golden boy, born into privilege, praised by everyone, never tasting defeat. Now, blow after blow, he fell apart completely. He severed contact with his old friends and comrades, disappearing from everyone's lives. The woman telling me this story sighed in sympathy, but I felt nothing, no pity, no sorrow. Everything they suffered now was the consequence of their own choices. If anything, part of me thought their punishment still wasn't enough. Time passed, and by the dawn of the 21st century, after decades of relentless effort and ambition, I had built a textile empire from the ground up. My factory had expanded far beyond what I once dreamed of. From a small, cramped workshop, it had grown into one of the country's leading companies in the industry. Our products weren't just thriving in the domestic market, they were exported across the globe, winning over international markets with quality and innovation. Thanks to the foresight my rebirth had given me, and my sharp instincts in an era of reform, I made the most of every opportunity, every gap in knowledge and access. Slowly but surely, I accumulated immense wealth. Now, I was one of the richest women in the nation, a billionaire entrepreneur, and one of the most influential figures in the country's textile industry. As for Aaron Blake, though he was now in his 60s, he still carried himself with the same upright strength and quiet authority that had first drawn me to him. Time had only added depth to his presence, a kind of mature, commanding allure that no youth could match. In his perfectly pressed military uniform, the shining stars on his shoulders radiated dignity and power. Yet whenever his eyes met mine, all that authority melted away, replaced by warmth and tenderness that never faded, no matter how many years passed. Through the seasons and the storms of life, our bond had only grown stronger. In this marriage, Aaron and I had always understood and supported each other, through hardship, through success, through the calm and the chaos alike. We faced the world side by side, hands clasped, hearts unwavering. The years flowed by, and through all their changes, one thing remained constant. Aaron beside me, our devoted daughter, and our sweet little granddaughter. A life full, peaceful, and complete. A fullness of life, something I had never even dared to dream of in my previous lifetime. Until that day, Aaron and I were driving our granddaughter to the park. As we approached the parking lot, an old man limped out from the guard booth, his hands trembling as he held up a board with a QR code, signaling for us to scan and pay the parking fee. The moment our eyes met, time seemed to freeze. It was Ethan Collins. Both of us stood stunned in silence, caught between shock and disbelief. Aaron, of course, had long forgotten the stories of my youth, the past I'd buried decades ago. He had no idea that the frail, unkempt man before us, the one whose clothes hung off his thin frame, whose face was lined with defeat, had once been the proud, arrogant regimental commander who believed himself untouchable. Without a hint of recognition or emotion, Aaron calmly scanned the code. The gate lifted, and our car rolled forward, merging quietly into the stream of traffic. Beside me, the soft, cheerful chatter of our granddaughter filled the car. Aaron's gentle laughter followed, patient and tender as he answered each of her innocent questions. In the rearview mirror, I caught one last glimpse of Ethan. He stood rooted to the spot, motionless, his eyes vacant as he watched our